Before we dive into this incredible story of resilience and hidden heroism, hit that subscribe button on K9 Miracle Stories. So many people watch these inspiring tales without subscribing and miss out on more. Don't be one of them. They called him a failure. For 3 months, Boone stumbled through every drill like he was sleepwalking. Couldn't track, wouldn't sit, flinched at every loud sound. Some said he was broken, others said he should have been put down. Until the morning a seal stepped onto the range and whistled once, and 20 years of training experience suddenly felt worthless. Because this dog wasn't lost. He was just waiting for someone who spoke his language. But what dark secret from his past had silenced him? What unimaginable trauma had turned a warrior into a shadow? Before we reveal the shocking truth that changed everything, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. And if you love stories about K9 heroes who refuse to give up, smash that subscribe button because what you're about to see will blow your mind and leave you wondering until the very end. The New Mexico sun was already brutal at 7 in the morning, turning the concrete training yard into a griddle that made your boots stick with every step. Officer Eli Harlow squinted against the glare as he pulled into the federal K9 complex. His Honda Civic looked pitiful next to the row of tactical vehicles and armored transports that lined the lot. 4 days on the job, and they were already handing him the problem case. "That one's yours," Sergeant Dorsey had said yesterday, pointing to a kennel at the far end like he was indicating a broken piece of equipment. Boone, Belgian Malinois, 4 years old. "Good luck. You're going to need it." The file they'd given him was thinner than a traffic citation. Boone had transferred in from what they called a non-civilian program. But reading between the redacted lines felt like trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing. No training logs, no certification trails, just a series of performance. Notes from 3 separate agencies that all ended the same way. Asterisk. Failed pairing attempt. Dog lacks functional obedience. Consider removal. What caught Eli's attention was a handwritten note clipped to the back page. Nearly illegible. Dog shows signs of selective response. Maybe trauma-related. Recommend patience. It was signed by someone at the Military Veterinary Hospital in Colorado, but the rest had been blacked out with permanent marker. Eli had grown up around working dogs, his grandfather's German shepherds, his uncle's hunting retrievers, even a stint helping train patrol dogs back in Phoenix before the budget cuts. But he'd never met a dog that looked at you like Boone did. Those eyes didn't blink as much as they calculated. Head low, ears forward, something unreadable simmering just beneath the surface. He didn't growl when strangers approached his kennel. Didn't bark at feeding time, just stared with the intensity of someone trying to solve a problem you couldn't even see. What hidden memories were locked behind that gaze? "Morning, bud," Eli said softly, clipping the lead to Boone's collar. The dog didn't resist, but he didn't cooperate either. Just stood there like he was tolerating the whole arrangement. They walked to the training yard like strangers forced to share an elevator. The morning's first drill was basic formation. Heel, stop, pivot, return. Kindergarten stuff for a dog with Boone's build and obvious breeding. But watching him move through the course was like watching someone try to remember a language they used to speak fluently. He'd start strong, shoulders square, pace controlled. Then something would shift behind those dark eyes, and he'd drift sideways, or stop completely, or just sit down in the middle of the course like he'd forgotten why he was there. It wasn't defiance. Eli had seen plenty of stubborn dogs. This was different, like Boone was waiting for a signal that never came. What signal was he listening for in the silence? The strangest part was how he moved when he thought no one was watching. During water breaks, Eli caught him naturally clearing corners, instinctively positioning himself with sight lines to multiple exits. He'd pause at doorways, scan left and right, then enter with the fluid grace of someone who'd done it 1,000 times before. But the moment training resumed, that focus would evaporate. "Focus, Boone," Eli would say, not harsh, just encouraging. "Come on, boy, I know you've got this," but Boone would just stare past him like he was listening for something that never came. The scent work was worse. They set up 4 identical boxes, only one containing the target odor. A simple cocaine simulation that most dogs could identify after 2 weeks of training. Boone approached the first box, sniffed once, then sat down and looked at Eli with an expression that seemed to say, "What's the point?" By lunch, the other handlers had started to notice. "How's your project going?" Officer Martinez asked, not bothering to hide his smirk as he watched Boone ignore a perfectly executed hand signal. "Still thinks he's too good for police work," added Thompson, a 20-year veteran whose own German shepherd could probably run drills in his sleep. "Maybe he needs to find a nice retirement home, somewhere he can chase tennis balls and forget about having a job." Officer Reeves, a newer handler with something to prove, was less diplomatic. "My dog learned basic recalls in 2 days. What's your excuse? Been working with him? 3 weeks? 4? Eli said quietly. 4 weeks, Reeves repeated, loud enough for the other handlers to hear, and he still can't track a tennis ball in an empty field. The laughter that followed wasn't cruel exactly, but it cut deep enough. These guys had been doing this longer than Eli had been out of college, and they all had dogs that performed like Swiss watches. What did he know about handling a case like Boone? But something about the way Boone carried himself during these conversations, the way his ears would flatten slightly, not in fear, but in what looked almost like shame, told Eli there was more to the story. What shame was he hiding? That first week blurred together in a parade of failed exercises and mounting frustration. Boone refused scent tracking completely, stared blankly at bite training demonstrations, and actually ran away when they fired the starting pistol for agility drills. Not just startled, flat out bolted, wedging himself under a maintenance truck until Eli could coax him out 20 minutes later. "He's cooked," Sergeant Dorsey said after watching Boone fail his 5th consecutive recall exercise. Whatever he had got left behind somewhere else. The paperwork had already started moving. Quiet conversations between supervisors, glances in Eli's, direction when they thought he wasn't looking. Some dogs, they said, just weren't meant to serve. Maybe it was kinder to admit defeat and find Boone a civilian home where the expectations weren't so high. But Friday evening, after everyone else had headed home and the desert air finally started to cool, Eli stayed behind. He sat on a bench outside Boone's kennel, not trying to train or test or prove anything, just being there. Boone lay in the corner facing the chain link wall like he was trying to disappear into it, not sleeping. Eli could tell from his breathing, just waiting for another day to end. "I don't know what happened to you out there," Eli said quietly, not expecting a response. "But whatever it wasn't your fault." Boone's ear twitched, the smallest movement, but Eli caught it. "My grandfather had a dog once. Old Blue came back from Vietnam with him." Eli leaned back against the bench, voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Blue never barked at fireworks, never played fetch, Never did much of anything except follow my grandfather around like a shadow. Everyone said he was broken. He paused, watching Boone's reflection in the kennel's water bowl. But when my grandfather had his heart attack, Blue somehow got the neighbors' attention, led them straight to where he'd collapsed in the barn, saved his life. Eli's voice caught slightly. Sometimes. The ones who look broken are just carrying weight. The rest of us can't see. Boone's ear twitched again and slowly. So slowly, Eli almost missed it. The dog turned his head. We'll figure it out together. Okay, no rush. For the first time all week, Boone looked at him. Really looked. And in those dark eyes, Eli saw something he'd been hoping for since day one, a flicker of trust. But was this trust enough to unlock the mystery? Monday brought a different approach. Eli showed up an hour early before the other handlers arrived, and the yard filled with noise and pressure. He brought coffee for himself and extra patience for Boone, moving through drills at half speed, letting the dog set the pace. Instead of forcing scent work, he scattered treats around the training area and just let Boone explore. Instead of demanding perfect heel position, he walked beside him like they were taking a stroll through the neighborhood. It wasn't training exactly, more like trust building. You don't have to be perfect, Eli told him as they meandered between orange cones that were supposed to mark an agility course. Just be you. Boone didn't transform overnight. He still ignored most commands, still spooked at sudden noises, still had that distant look in his eyes like he was seeing something the rest of them couldn't. But he started staying closer to Eli during breaks, started meeting his eyes when his name was called. Small progress, but progress. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday that nobody saw coming. They were running environmental exposure drills. Basic stuff designed to get dogs comfortable with urban noise. Car horns, construction sounds, crowd chatter played through. Speakers at gradually increasing volumes. Most dogs handled it fine after a few sessions. Boone had been doing okay. Until Instructor Wells cranked up the speakers for a simulated gunfire sequence. The first burst was barely 90 dB. Less noise than a motorcycle. But the moment those sharp staccato pops filled the air, Boone went rigid like he'd been struck by lightning. His ears flattened against his skull. His breathing turned shallow and rapid. Then he started scanning. Not looking around like a confused dog, but scanning like a soldier checking for threats. His head moved in precise arcs, covering sectors, looking for something that wasn't there. "Easy, Boone," Eli said, but his voice seemed to come from very far away. Then Boone spun in place, growling at the empty air 6 feet to his left, and bolted across the yard with a speed that made Eli's blood run cold. "Boone!" Eli called, sprinting after him. "Boone! Wait!" But Boone was gone. Not just physically, but mentally. He wasn't running from the noise. He was responding to it, following some protocol burned so deep into his brain that conscious thought couldn't override it. He crashed through an equipment gate, scattered traffic cones like they were enemy combatants, and dove under the closest vehicle he could find. Eli found him there, pressed against the rear axle, whole body trembling like he was caught in an earthquake only he could feel. His eyes were wide but unfocused, like he was seeing a different place, a different time. His breathing came in short, controlled bursts, the pattern of someone trying to stay quiet while under fire. What nightmare from his past had pulled him back? "Hey, buddy," Eli whispered, dropping to his knees beside the truck. "It's just me. You're safe." Boone didn't respond to his voice. didn't even seem to hear it. Eli didn't try to pull him out, didn't reach for the leash or give commands. He just stretched out on the gravel beside the truck and waited, one hand extended where Boone could see it, if he chose to look. After what felt like an hour, but was probably closer to 15 minutes, Boone's breathing started to slow. His eyes gradually focused, and when they finally found Eli's face, there was something different in them. Recognition, maybe. Even gratitude. "There you are," Eli said softly. "Welcome back." That night, Eli couldn't sleep. He sat in his apartment replaying the incident, trying to understand what he'd witnessed. That wasn't just fear. It was something deeper, something that spoke of experiences no training manual had prepared him for. He pulled up Boone's file on his laptop, scanning the sparse information for clues he might have missed. Under previous assignment, it just said DOD K9 program. Under reason for transfer, someone had typed administrative, but there was a notation at the bottom he hadn't noticed before, buried in the small print. Handler. KIA. Subject requires specialized placement. Handler killed in action. Eli stared at the screen until his eyes burned, pieces of a puzzle slowly clicking into place. Boone hadn't been transferred because he was defective. He'd been transferred because his world had been blown apart and nobody knew how to put it back together. But what exactly had shattered that world? The morning of Boone's scheduled evaluation, what everyone knew would be his last chance, started with the sound of tires on gravel that didn't belong to any vehicle Eli recognized. Two black Suburbans rolled through the main gate like they owned the place. No markings, no fanfare, just the kind of quiet authority that made people step aside without being asked. The instructors and handlers gathered near the fence line, whispering among themselves as the vehicles parked in perfect formation. The doors opened with military precision and out stepped four men who moved like they were still wearing uniforms, even though they were dressed in civilian tactical gear. Quiet boots, watchful eyes, the kind of stillness that came from knowing exactly how dangerous the world could be. At the center of them was a man who didn't need an introduction. Commander Nash looked like he'd been carved out of granite and weathered by decades of hard choices. Broad shoulders, silver threading through dark hair, a scar along his jawline that told stories he'd probably never share. But it was his eyes that caught Eli's attention, the same distant, calculating look he'd seen in Boone. "Can we help?" "You, gentlemen?" Sergeant Dorsey asked, stepping forward with the careful politeness of someone dealing with people whose clearance level he couldn't guess. Nash nodded once. "I'm here for Boone." The training yard went dead quiet. Eli felt his stomach drop. "Boone. As in the Belgian Malinois you've been working with," Nash confirmed, his gaze finding Eli across the yard. "I understand he's having some adjustment issues." Dorsey looked confused. "How did you even know about our dog?" "Word travels," Nash said simply, then louder. "Where is he?" Eli found himself walking forward, Boone padding silently beside him on a loose lead. The dog had been unusually calm all morning, but now his head was up, ears forward, like he was trying to solve a familiar puzzle. Nash stopped 15 feet away and studied Boone with the intensity of someone reading a report written in a language only he understood. "Hello, Ghost," he said quietly. Boone froze. Then Nash gave a low, sharp whistle, a specific tone that cut through the morning air like a blade. The change in Boone was instantaneous and complete. His posture straightened, his breathing steadied, and for the first time since Eli had known him, the confusion cleared from his eyes. He didn't move from Eli's side, but everything about his body language screamed recognition. Alert, ready, home. Jesus, one of the instructors whispered. Look at him. Nash took a step forward. Boone didn't flinch. Another step. The dog remained perfectly still, but now his tail was level, his weight balanced on all four paws like he was ready for whatever came next. You know me, don't you, boy? Nash said, and there was something almost gentle in his voice. Boone sat clean, precise, immediate. Eli had never seen him respond to a command so quickly. Nash turned to the gathered staff, his expression serious. We need to talk. The debrief room felt smaller with Nash in it, like his presence took up more space than his physical size should have allowed. Eli sat across from him, still processing what he'd witnessed in the yard, while Sergeant Vicks stood near the door like she was guarding state secrets. Boone wasn't supposed to end up here. Nash began without preamble. He was part of a joint special operations program. We called it Ghost Circuit Small Teams. Classified missions, surgical extractions in places that don't officially exist. Eli leaned forward. And now the program's been dissolved. Most of the assets were reassigned or retired through proper channels. Nash's jaw tightened slightly. Boone fell through the cracks. What kind of cracks? Vicks asked. Nash was quiet for a moment, like he was deciding how much to reveal. 3 years ago, we were running an extraction in eastern Turkey. High-value targets, hostile territory, buildings rigged to blow, intelligence. Said we had maybe 20 minutes before the whole block went up. His voice took on a distant quality. Boone was my partner for that op. Full non-verbal protocol, off-leash work, the kind of trust you build over years of working in places where a single mistake gets everyone killed. He could clear a room faster than most human teams, identify threats from scent alone, guide hostages through debris in complete darkness. Nash's hands clenched slightly. We'd extracted 4 civilians and were moving to the rally point when the charges started going off early. Not our intel failure. Someone on the inside had changed the timeline. The structure collapsed during exfil and I got pinned under a concrete beam, broke my leg in 3 places, lost comms, couldn't move. Eli waited, sensing there was more. Standard protocol was for him to return to the rally point and guide the backup team to my location. Simple extraction. But instead, Nash's jaw tightened. Instead, he stayed, refused every command to leave, held a defensive perimeter around my position for 6 hours while insurgents tried to dig us out. The room was completely silent now. They came in waves, small arms fire, grenades, everything they had. Boone took shrapnel from 2 different explosions, kept fighting, never made a sound, never retreated. When the rescue team finally reached us, they found him still standing guard, bleeding from 3 different wounds, holding off a group of fighters who'd been trying to finish the job. Nash looked down at his hands. I carried him out myself. Thought he was going to die in my arms. The medic said he'd lost so much blood most dogs would have collapsed hours earlier. But he wouldn't quit. Not while I needed him. But he didn't, Eli said quietly. No. but the unit got scattered after that mission. I was medically retired, sent stateside for surgery and recovery. Boone went to a military vet hospital, then supposedly to a specialized handler program. Nash's expression hardened. Except someone screwed up the paperwork, listed him as unplaceable due to trauma symptoms, and shoved him into the civilian transfer system. Without his service record, Vix said understanding, without anyone knowing what he'd been trained to do, what he'd been through, or why he needed specialized care. Nash looked directly at Eli. For the past 18 months, he's been bounced from one facility to another, each one thinking he was just another failed police prospect. Eli felt a cold anger building in his chest. All this time, he wasn't broken. He was just waiting, Nash finished, waiting for someone who spoke his language. The three of them sat in silence for a moment, absorbing the weight of what had been lost, what had been found. Finally, Vix spoke up. "So what happens? Now?" Nash stood slowly. "I'd like to run one final test. Something Boone will understand. Something that might help you see what you're really working with." Eli nodded. "What did you have in mind?" Nash's smile was sharp as a knife edge, a ghost run, like the old days. But would this test reveal the hero within, or confirm the doubts forever? The mock village at the eastern edge of the complex looked like a movie set that had been left to weather in the desert sun, plywood buildings with blown-out windows, concrete barriers arranged to simulate street fighting, the kind of urban warfare training ground that most local K-9 units never needed to use. Nash had requested minimal observers, just Eli, Sergeant Vix, and two other instructors who'd promised to keep their mouths shut about whatever they were about to witness. The SEALs remained on the perimeter, quiet as shadows. "This isn't about obedience," Nash explained as they walked Boone to the starting position. "It's about instinct under pressure. One target hidden somewhere in the village, a scent signature designed to mimic human stress pheromones. Same as we used for live hostage scenarios overseas. He produced a Remington 870 shotgun from one of the vehicles, checked the chamber, and loaded a single blank round. Fair warning, this is going to be loud. Real loud. If Boone isn't ready, we'll know immediately." Eli knelt beside his partner, one hand resting on the dog's shoulder. "You don't have to do this, bud. But if you want to show them who you really are." Boone's eyes were locked on Nash, but there was no fear in them now. "Just focus." Nash walked 20 paces back, raised the shotgun, and called over his shoulder. "Everyone ready?" Eli gave a thumbs up. Nash pulled the trigger. The blast shattered the morning quiet like a sledgehammer through glass, echoing off the plywood walls and sending a flock of crows screaming into the sky. The other dogs in the distant kennels started barking. The instructors flinched despite their ear protection. Boone didn't even twitch. Then, Nash gave that same sharp whistle from before. One note clear as a bell. Boone was already moving. He flowed across the ground like liquid shadow, low and controlled, reading the terrain with an intelligence that made Eli's breath catch. No hesitation, no confusion, just pure operational focus as he cleared the first building with movements too precise to be instinct. Watching him work was like seeing a master craftsman return to his tools after years away. He checked corners with systematic precision, dismissed decoy scents without breaking stride, navigated obstacles that would have slowed human operators. This wasn't the confused, struggling dog from the training yard. This was something else entirely. Silence. Seconds. A minute. Eli found, himself holding his breath. Even the seals on the perimeter had gone completely still, watching with the focused attention of professionals recognizing excellence in their field. Then Boone emerged from the third building, moving at the same controlled pace, and positioned himself beside the doorway. Not sitting like a normal police dog would, but standing at alert, one paw slightly forward, weight balanced, ready to engage or retreat depending on orders. He didn't bark or signal, just stood guard with the quiet authority of someone who'd done this in places where barking would get everyone killed. "Sweet Jesus," one of the instructors whispered. "He's not a police dog." "No," Nash said quietly, walking over to confirm what Boone had found. "He's not." The target was exactly where Boone had indicated. But as Nash emerged from the building, shaking his head in something that looked like amazement, he didn't just find it, Nash called out. He identified the most defensible position in the building, checked for secondary threats, and established overwatch on the primary approach route. He looked at the gathered observers with something approaching awe. That's not search and rescue. That's tactical operations at the highest level. Nash emerged from the building and approached Boone, who remained at his post until given a subtle hand signal to stand down. Only then did the dog relax, trotting over to Eli with something approaching pride in his posture. "He doesn't need me anymore," Nash said, watching the reunion. "But I think he's found someone new to trust." Eli ran his hands through Boone's fur, feeling the steady heartbeat beneath, the controlled breathing of an operator coming down from a successful mission. For the first time since they'd been paired, Boone leaned into the contact, accepting the praise like he finally understood he'd earned it. "What happens now?" Eli asked. Nash adjusted the shotgun on his shoulder. "Now you stop treating him like he's broken and start treating him like the hero he is." There was no ceremony when Nash left, no medals or formal recognition, just a firm handshake and a quiet word to Eli before the SEALs loaded back into their vehicles. "He picked you," Nash said simply. "That whistle I used, it was a reset command designed to activate his training protocols under specific circumstances. But when I gave the stand-down signal, he chose to come to you instead of me." Eli looked down at Boone, who sat calmly at his side. "What does that mean?" "It means he's ready to move forward with a partner who sees him for what he is, not what he used to be." The Suburbans rolled out as quietly as they'd arrived, leaving behind a training facility that would never look at. Failure the same way again. Within a week, Boone's status had been quietly updated. No longer a remedial case or a problem to be solved. Instead, he was designated as a specialized demonstration animal, the kind of assignment reserved for dogs whose capabilities exceeded standard protocols. The mockery stopped. The snide comments disappeared. When Boone walked through the training yard now, the other handlers watched with something approaching reverence. Officer Reeves was the first to approach Eli directly, hat in hand, looking embarrassed. "Listen, I owe you an apology, and him. I had no idea what we were looking at." Thompson, the 20-year veteran, was more direct. "Command wants to know if you'd be willing to help develop new trauma protocols for dogs coming out of military service." He paused, studying Boone, who sat calmly beside Eli. "Turns out there are more like him in the system than anyone realized. Even Sergeant Dorsey pulled Eli aside that Friday. I've been doing this for 15 years, he said quietly. Never seen anything like what that dog did in the village. The way he moved, the decisions he made, that's not training. That's combat experience. But the biggest change was in Boone himself, not because he'd suddenly become perfect at traditional police work. He still struggled with routine traffic, stops, and standard drug detection. The gunfire simulations still made him tense, probably always would. But now when the episodes came, Eli knew how to help him through them. More importantly, Boone had stopped waiting for signals that would never come. He'd started building new patterns, new responses, new ways of being useful, that honored what he'd been while embracing what he could become. Eli found himself walking differently, too. Prouder, more aware of the honor that came with being chosen by someone who'd already given everything for others. That evening, as the sun dropped toward the horizon and the desert air finally started to cool, Eli and Boone took one more walk around the perimeter of the complex. No leash this time. No commands, just two professionals who had found their way back to understanding. "You know what?" Eli said as they paused to watch the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. "I think we're going to be just fine." Boone looked up at him with those intelligent dark eyes, and for the first time since they'd met, his tail wagged just once. But it was enough. Have you ever met someone, person, or animal who carried invisible scars from service? Sometimes the deepest wounds are the ones you can't see, and healing takes a different kind of courage than we usually talk about. Boone's story reminds us that failure isn't always about capability. Sometimes it's about being judged by the wrong standards or being asked to perform in a world that doesn't understand where you've been. What would you have done in Eli's position? Would you have kept believing in a partner everyone else had written off? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one, and they help us understand what stories matter most to you. If this story touched something in you, hit that like button and share it with someone who believes in second chances. Subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell so you never miss another story about the heroes who serve without asking for recognition. Our other K9 stories are appearing on your screen right now. Each one a reminder that courage comes in all shapes and sizes, and sometimes the greatest warriors are the quietest ones. We'll see you tomorrow with another story that proves heroism isn't always loud or obvious. Sometimes it's just about showing up day after day and refusing to give up on someone the world has forgotten. Until then, remember to look closer. The most extraordinary stories are often hiding in plain sight. If this tale of hidden heroism inspired you, subscribe to K9 Miracle Stories now and turn on notifications. Don't miss the next one. Hit that bell and join the pack.